Welcome back to Talking Shop. We're glad you're here. This is Christmas 1, and this is Dan, I'm Tim, this is Adam. And I cut Adam off, actually. He had a story. Tell the story quick in this cold entrance, and then we'll jump into it.
All right, so I have 7 younger siblings. Mm-hmm. All of them are adopted.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was having a conversation with one of them about about God and how, right, he was under the impression that you have to do all of these good things, all of these good works to earn God's approval. I pointed out to him, that makes our parents more gracious than God, right? Because you didn't do anything. You were just a little baby, right? And you came to our family and our parents adopted you.
Yeah.
Just out of grace, just out of their sheer love for you. So that would make our parents more gracious to you than God has been gracious to you, because you have to do works to earn God's love, but you didn't have to do anything to earn your parents' love.
Right, that's awesome. That's great, because we're doing the text on Galatians 4:4-7, which is all about adoption. Go figure, right? And there's your opening illustration that you can use as well. Anything, did I cut you off again?
There
awesome,
you go.
Good. Let's get to it.
Spit out my Lord in every way, yet I'm still welcome in the arms of the King.
Welcome back. We are. Technically this is the first Sunday of Christmas. It's also going to be New Year's Eve, but we decided to do Christmas. Well, New Year's Eve isn't a church holiday, so we're doing the Christmas one for Galatians rather than that Romans text, which is the very text from Romans 8. But we're doing Galatians 4:4-7. A short one this morning, which I think kind of doesn't do it the justice it needs. You really do need the first 3 verses, or you kind of don't understand the argument. Mm-hmm. The first 3 verses talk about the heir, as long as he's a child, is no different from a slave, right? So he's talking about everybody before Jesus, right? You know, and this idea that the law was there as a caretaker,
yes,
to point us towards Christ. Mm-hmm. In fact, I think he says that in regards in the same way. Also, we were children enslaved by the elementary principles of the world.
Yeah,
I think it's kind of funny that he calls the law elementary. It's sort of the precursor towards that which is more difficult. I mean, does that seem to make sense? I don't know. I think we make the law a lot more complex than it is.
Well, I think this is what you and I were discussing before Adam got here today, that with natural law being built into the fabric of creation, and when you act out against that, there are very obvious things that happen to your body if you go against the law in certain ways.
Yeah, to your heart, to your mind, to your soul. There are consequences for that stuff, that natural repercussions that happen regardless of how you feel about it. You know what I mean? Regardless of any of that.
Yeah. And I mean, we can use kind of a goofy one, like alcohol is a gift from God, right?
Amen, brother.
It's a no. are you, the scriptures even speak positively about it in several places.
Of course, yeah.
But if you have too much of it, the next day there's a natural consequence.
Right.
You don't feel well, to say the least.
Yeah, and it's like any gift from God. If you abuse it, food, drink, sexuality, any of it. If it's abused, it will push back.
Yeah,
because it's not designed to be used in that way. Yeah, very good. That's a good connection, right? So that's the law, and it's pretty simple because it happens whether you want it to or not. It simply is. And it's elementary, right? And then we get to our text, verse 4. But when the fullness of time had shown up, right? We get this cool Greek phrase, pleroma to chrono, right? This the chronograph of everything. When the time was right, which was after 400 years of silence from the prophets, from God.
Yeah.
As the nation of Israel is trying to recover from the Babylonian exile and everything else, and now God goes silent.
And then the Greeks take over, and then the Jews have a little bit of freedom, and then the Romans take over, and that's where we find ourselves
Right.
in the story of Christ.
In the fullness of time. And even though the Romans are in charge, the roadway systems are better and the communication systems are better, you know, and all of these things that are happening under the rule of another.
Yeah.
The fullness of time, God apostled, right? God sent his son. Born of a woman, born under the law. I think it's kind of beautiful in there how Paul points out that this is not some sort of, you know, this is the whole anti-Arian thing. Of course, Arius wasn't there yet, but the anti-Arian piece that he's born like every other human being has ever been born.
Kind of.
Right. Fully God, fully man.
Yeah.
Right. And under the law. So that he might save. What's the word in there for redeem?
Ex agorazo is the verb.
Yeah, interesting. So he might bring out of, right? Those who are under that law, under that caretaker, so that we're no longer treated as one who is cared for, but rather you're treated as a son. Cultural difference, right? And I think it's important to explain it. American culture has extended adolescence out, in some cases, into their early 30s.
Right.
Whereas in this culture, you were either a child, as a boy, certainly as a girl too, but you either were a child or you were a man. They didn't even have a category for adolescence.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a 20th century invention.
Right, exactly. So you were either one who was cared for by another, or you were one who had responsibility, and one who had to act like a man. And I think that's a big deal for us as we read into that in our own culture. It might have implications for child rearing and all sorts of other things, right?
Yeah.
Certainly how fathers treat their sons, but how we treat our daughters as well, too. And just the reality of responsibility. But here, right, specifically, it's Paul. We are adopted as sons.
There's this cool image it's not in chapter 4, but when they receive the clothing of the adult, right? There's, I can't remember which commentary I read this in a while back, but when they would do this ceremony for boys becoming men, and they would put on this robe, and Paul uses that as our robe of righteousness, right? We're putting on Christ. But they're putting on this robe of now the heir has control of the asset.
Yeah.
No longer are they, like it says, you're not under the control of the elementary principles. But that's what this is referring to, right? That's already happened in the text. They have this new robe of righteousness.
Right, and because of that, you are not one that has to be cared for because you have ownership in what exists.
Yeah.
Right? This is so, why do I obey God? Because I have ownership in what he's doing.
Yeah.
What else would I do, right?
Yeah.
How else am I going to behave as a part of the adopted family of God? And then he makes this great assumption in verse 6, and because you are sons, right?
Yeah.
and such a beautiful thing right there. It's that assumption. You are, so what does it look like?
Yeah, it's not, and if you are a son, it's because you are that.
Right. God sent the Spirit of His Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. So probably already know this. What's the Abba, Father thing, right?
Well, Abba, some people say this is like daddy kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would
In
go.
Aramaic.
In Aramaic. I don't know that I would go that far. I I don't know. It's definitely a term that a kid would use for their father. Because my kids don't call me father. I could,
Yet.
yeah. I could certainly say, no longer shall you call me dad. You shall call me father dearest from now on. Right? No, but
do your parishioners call you father?
no.
It's a closer term than God as just sort of that father out there.
I just have heard too many cringy things like, Daddy God, we pray into you. You know, and I try to avoid cringy.
It's more than
things.
addressing the office. It's implying a more intimate relationship than just I am a subject under this office of father.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Right. Whereas under the law, I am a subject under the judge, right? Under the one who has established the law.
Yeah.
Versus now I have ownership. And that law will have its way one way or the other because it's elementary. But the next step is to understand the grace piece.
Yeah.
Now that I am in charge of stuff, I live inside of the family. I live inside of the grace. Yeah. So that you are no longer a slave to the law or to sin or to anything else, right? You've been freed from all those things. But a son, and if a son, then an heir according to God, because he said so, right? You talked a little bit about that, Adam, the 403B thing, and can you repeat that?
Christianity doesn't have an awesome retirement plan.
Right.
Right? Because
Or it's the most awesome retirement.
well, it's not a retirement plan.
Right, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's in our retirement plans, we contribute to our 403B, right? Us or our congregation contributes to the LCMS pension plan, right? We all worked for that. All of the inputs to those things come from our work. But because we are sons, we are heirs. We have an inheritance that we didn't work for. Right? So we, just like my kids, they will inherit all 5 cents that are in my bank account when I die.
Yeah, and a 25-year-old car.
Right?
You're welcome.
They didn't work for those 500,000 miles on my car. Right? They just inherited it.
Yeah.
And so, right, that's what Christianity is, in that we don't work to earn those things.
Yeah.
Right.
They're just granted and gifted to us out of benevolent love.
Right.
Well, and to piggyback on that, this benevolence of God, this being called a son even goes for the women in the congregation.
Yeah.
Right.
Notice that Paul doesn't say you're a firstborn child. No, he's intentional. He says you're a firstborn son. You receive the inheritance of the firstborn son. So when you ladies who are outside the room right now are baptized, God sees you as his firstborn son, and you receive the full inheritance of a firstborn son, the only son of God, right? And he refers to that. But don't soften that up, right? Don't say, oh, ladies, you receive what the lady would receive, because they wouldn't receive anything.
Right. Nada. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You receive the full inheritance that you did nothing for, which has implications onto all levels of theology.
Right.
It does, but it speaks to like 4 verses before in chapter 3, where it's that whole, once you are baptized, you put on Christ. At that point, there's no Jew or Greek, slave or free, male or female. You are all one in Christ Jesus. And if you are in Christ, then you are Abraham's offspring, heirs according to promise.
Yeah. And you're in the club.
Yeah.
Right.
You're in.
And I'll point out that, right, kind of like you guys were talking about, it's not if you are a son, right? It's declarative.
Yeah. That you are.
Right? You are a son.
Yeah.
And so, right, and this kind of goes back to the Reformation in Luther's quest for assurance,
Yeah.
right? And so some of our other Christian brothers and sisters are always trying to look inward. They're looking to all sorts of other things to assure themselves that they are indeed an heir. right? That they
Evidence.
are right. They're
Yeah.
they're looking for the evidence inside themselves.
Right.
Have I worked hard enough? Do I like this enough to assure themselves that they are part of the family? But I don't think that's what Paul's doing here. Is pointing them inward to themselves, right? I don't have it off the top of my head, but I'm guessing there's a baptism reference not too far from this adoption
Yeah,
reference,
I'm
right?
sure there are
4
there
verses
is.
before.
Yeah,
Right.
4 before, yeah, baptized into Christ, right?
Right.
Verse 27 of chapter 3.
There you go.
Yeah,
I was like, I don't know where it is off the top of my head,
but I know it's in within about 10 verses of it, because that's the nature of what's happening in this text, which, by the way, makes this, you don't have to do Romans 8. You could do this and shift it towards New Year's Eve easily, right? As we move from one thing into another, here's this, you're moving from the current year into the next year. It's another example, and you could do an entire sermon about how we all throughout life we move from one thing into another. And this is that movement, and now you've been given the family crest, which defines every other movement of your life. And that would be a really easy way to preach this out. You just talk about all the different movements and how that movement is defined by this relationship. All the way through, which is evidence of Christmas and evidence of Christ, who's lived and died and risen again.
Yeah, I think the first word or first phrase of this text, because they started at verse 4. If you didn't want to cover all the verses 1 to 3, you could use that when the fullness of time had come as a way to do a sort of story told, because he's referencing Genesis. 100% here. Born of a woman. Oh. Is this that promised seed, right? Genesis 3, that whole thing.
Right.
Behold the man.
Right. With God's help.
Eve says, I've had a man.
With God's help, I've had a man. Yeah.
Like with a little bit of surprise is the way I always read that one.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
But then the adoption of sons, that's like Genesis 22 with Abraham. And he's worried that he's not going to have a son, and Eliezer of Damascus is going to be my heir. And, and then God promises, you won't have to adopt Eliezer, don't worry. You'll have more, more descendants than the seashore.
Yeah, you don't have to look far to get your illustrations from the Bible for this, right? You don't have to look... and you can dig a little deeper if you want. You can look at, what was the name of the Mephibosheth, right? That inherits, that was Saul's son, and David says, "Hey, is there any heir left of the family of Saul?" And he goes and he finds Mephibosheth, and he goes, "Give Mephibosheth everything that he should have inherited from Saul, yet he's been on the run." And he was like, he's lame and he's crippled because he was dropped as a baby and everything. What a cool reference for this, right? This is how we come to God, dropped on our heads as a baby,
That's 2 Samuel 9.
Yeah, and crippled and lame and all of that, and wow, what a cool way to play that through. But he receives by grace through the first David what we see a greater example of through the lineage of David.
Wow. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, so that's a fun one too. You can play with lots of stuff you can do with this one. Galatians 4 is money, right? It's for preaching law, gospel, and the grace of God through adoption. Like, subscribe. Let us know how you did it. Let us know, did you use Mephibosheth? Let us know how he worked out for you. And God bless your preaching.